It's Halloween and the cooks from Frank's restaurant called Rue Galilée just finished their shift, so they're ready to go out and show off their costumes. He stays to serve a woman named Lola. She's very pleased with the food. After she's finished eating, they are seen leaving together. Lola mentions that the name of the restaurant is the same as a block in Paris where she once lived. Frank says it was the same for him. It was actually where he learned how to cook when he was a kid. He dropped out of high school and bought a plane ticket to France with the money he saved from baking pizzas in Queens. Frank arranged a reservation to a restaurant where he used to be sous chef. He's there with Lola and her mother named Patricia. Patricia uses the opportunity to tell him that Tina Turner has a house in Nice, France, and a magazine called Architectural Digest is sending her there to write about it. And emphasizes that Tina has one night-only show tonight, so she's getting a ride on her jet tomorrow. Then she mentions that after Tina she will be off to Paris for some fun. And that perhaps she could bring Wayne Newton tomorrow before leaving. Frank would love to meet this man, although Lola comments she won't be able to be there because she'll have classes. Lola is happy when Frank calls out Patricia for being patronizing. Back at Frank's restaurant, he's working as usual, and after he closes the place he goes to another restaurant where he sees Lola at the bar talking to some man she just met, named Keith Winkleman. So Frank decides to sit at a table close by and just watch. Keith offers Lola a job and leaves. Frank now calls her to ask if she's still with her mom. Lola answers that her mother is still in her room and that she's been there for over an hour. Frank surprises her from behind and asks who that man was from before. Lola tells him it was no one important. Frank seems to be fine with the answer and proceeds to tell her that a deal has been closed, so there'll be new owners, new chef and new everything. Lola is sorry to hear that. Frank found a job as a private chef, but seems aren't going so smoothly. He finds it difficult to please his new picky clients. Afterwards he visits Lola. She's very happy to tell him that she got a new job as a fashion incubator, so they'll pay her as a young designer to come up with clothes for their store. Frank isn't too happy about the fact that Keith is the owner of the company. The next morning Frank tells Lola that we'll be picking them up at 7 p.m. to go to Los Angeles. Frank then leaves for work. However, when the time to get on the road, Lola takes longer than expected to appear, so Frank tells Will he can go ahead. When they're inside the apartment, Lola tells him to have a seat. Lola starts to say she made a mistake, but Frank receives a call meant for Lola. The man on the phone says a guest said his girlfriend left her phone in his suite and he wants to know if she's the one. Lola admits it was her indeed. They tell her that she can pick up the phone at the concierge anytime. Frank gets obviously mad and asks her who it was. She said it was only this dude from California and that he meant nothing. Frank is at a bar now. He notices how a woman is getting abused, so he steps in to defend her, but ends up arrested by the police. They let him leave after Lola paid his bail. Then they go to a restaurant. Lola tells him if he remembers this man named Alan, Patricia mentioned during their meal a few days ago. Alan used to be her mother's boyfriend back when they lived in Paris and he raped Lola. And now no one else knows but him. Frank asks why didn't tell her mom. Lola says it was because she was afraid her mother wouldn't believe her. Then Frank demands to know the story behind Alan. Lola tells him he comes from a rich Swedish family who lost all their money and moved to France to start all over and wrote a bestseller book, and after that he left her mother for a rich woman. Lola says that what happened had an effect on her and that's why she's the way she is. They seem to have worked things out because they're still living together. Frank searches Alan on the internet to find more about him while Lola is still sleeping. Then he goes to work. The rich woman for whom he's working asks him to present himself in front of the guests from her gathering. Within those guests we see Lola sitting next to Keith. Lola excuses herself from the table and meets Frank in the kitchen. Frank asks her what she's doing there. Lola says it's Keith's partner's house. Then Keith comes in to congratulate the meals he prepared. Lola uses the opportunity to introduce Frank as her boyfriend. Keith tells him that he should have his own restaurant and Lola mentions he used to own one. Frank's taking a shower, but gets interrupted by a call from who he believes to be Lola, but it's actually Keith. He asks if he knows Henri Ricard, a chef with many 3-star Michelin restaurants. Keith then tells him that Henri opened up a new spot at the Encore, but he didn't like any of the chefs that had an audition for the position. So Keith, Having connections with Henri did his thing and got him an audition in Paris for this Friday. Keith reassures him by saying that he took care of everything including the plane tickets. Frank arrives in Paris and hands Alan's address. He calls Lola before doing his audition, but she doesn't pick up the phone. Now at the kitchen, he meets the chef Khalil, who shows him the different boxes with ingredients he'll have to use to cook the meals. Frank shows him a piece of truffle he plans to use. Khalil follows Frank's instructions to help him with the meal. When the time's up, they go to present Frank's plates to the guests, which are Ricard himself and his daughter. Ricard isn't sure about Frank's decision to cook a roast chicken. At the end, Frank gets told by the manager that the truffle he used wasn't allowed, so he didn't get the job. At night, Frank decides to go out and find Alan. He finds him at a bar. Frank introduces himself as Keith and tells him he's his fan. Alan decides to show him around Paris, but first takes him to his apartment to offer him a drink. Alan tells him he's married, but he has the occasional fling which his wife also has, but their only rule is that there must not be any strings attached. After a little while into the conversation, Alan realizes the oddity of this interaction and points out that Frank is not telling him the truth. So Frank cuts the acting and shows the man he's got a knife, then confronts him about raping a woman. But Alan says he has never raped anyone. After remembering Frank is from Las Vegas, he connects the dots and decides to show him something. It's a sexual footage of Lola with another woman being instructed on what to do by Alan. It's clear that what she did with Alan then was all consensual. Frank asks who's the other girl in the tape. Alan offers to introduce her to him, so they go to a club. Alan gives him his card and tells him he stays at Encore Hotel when he's in Las Vegas. Frank thanks him and Alan leaves. The next day, Ricard asks Frank to meet up with him. Ricard confesses Frank to be a very good chef, but he's not sure if he'll be strong enough for the pressure this new restaurant demands. Frank simply agrees, accepting the job. He then leaves for Las Vegas. He's greeted by Lola, and then Frank lets her know he knows about her actual past. But then he asks her for the truth because he wants to hear it from her. Lola says he got played by Alan. Now Lola tells him the whole actual story. She says she went to Paris to study and that Alan was the only person she knew there and he offered his place to stay there. Lola says that she went to sleep, but when she woke up he had tied her hands and feet to the bed, and she fell in love with him. Then when she found out she was pregnant, he vanished. Alan's wife told her that if she got an abortion and left France immediately, she was willing to write her a check for $400,000. So she came to Las Vegas a week later, and that was when she met him. But that morning he called Lola and begged her to let him apologize to her. After she's done speaking, Frank just asks her why she didn't tell him that before and apologizes for everything that happened. Lola is really sad, but tells him maybe it's best for them to let go of each other. Frank makes an international call to say he'll be cooking the full menu for Henri next week. Now in Paris, he meets up with Madame Letellier, Ala's wife. Frank tells that he needs to hear it from her. Letellier seems a bit hesitant to talk at first, but she confirms that Alan got Lola pregnant and she did give her money to go away. Frank lets her know that Alan and Lola met again in Las Vegas when he told her it was just a business trip. Frank finds Alan at a hotel. We see that message slides under his door. It's signed by Lola and says to meet her at his hotel at a restaurant that hasn't opened yet. Alan arrives at the place, but instead of being greeted by Lola is Frank, who comes out. Frank confronts him about the lie he told his wife about currently being on another of his many business trips. Frank pours him a drink and tells him to stay away from Lola. Alan says that his wife is a thing he tolerates, but Lola is his prize, so he doesn't want to let go of her. Frank pulls out a plane ticket and tells him his flight is in 4 hours. And he better take it because the cameras in the place also record sound. Alan's wife gave Frank her email to send her proof of everything. So essentially Alan doesn't have a choice and it's forced to leave. At Frank's new restaurant opening, he invites Lola, who arrives a little bit late. Frank comes up to her and offers her the same plate she had when they first met. Frank wants to know if Lola still wants to be with him. So he tells her that he's going to go get changed and that if when he comes back she's still there, he'll know she loves him. When Frank returns, he finds the place empty and it's only made clear to us, the viewers, that Lola was actually still there, but hiding herself.